Tommy, was really interesting because, of course, we're still in the middle of these tit-for-tat actions between Washington and Beijing. So the action in itself, for me, wasn't that surprising. It was more about the timing. It came bang in the middle of Joe Biden's inaugural speech.
Yeah, the timing was certainly interesting. As you say, 28 officials from the previous administration on this list. And certainly in terms of the timing, that sends a message, doesn't it, very clearly from China, that it doesn't want to see a continued escalation in tensions between the two sides, that it is prepared to act as Beijing would see it. So 28 officials from the previous Trump administration, including the bête noire for China, which is Mike Pompeo, as you say, his final swan song act, of course, in terms of the years of ramping up of pressure over China by Pompeo and his team was, of course, labeling the crackdown in Xinjiang as genocide. So he was on the list, so he has been sanctioned by China. But also on the list were other officials, including Peter Navarro, Matt Pottinger, the NSA, the National Security Advisor, Robert O'Brien. The deputy is Matt Pottinger, and also the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Kelly Craft, the former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. They've all been sanctioned. They will not be allowed to travel to China, Hong Kong or Macau or conduct business with China. In terms of how some of those officials responded, the likes of former NSA John Bolton, he was also on the list. He actually sent out a tweet saying that this was a recognition of his efforts to defend American freedom. Now, China's rationale for doing this, it put out a statement. It said that the reason it was sanctioning these officials was because they had crafted a policy against China that was crazy, as they've described it, that seriously disrupted US-China relations, and this was the response from Beijing.
Tom, what sort of a domestic response have we seen to the inauguration today?
Well, we've had something of an olive branch being held out by Beijing. We had officials yesterday saying that they hope that the two sides under the Biden administration can work under the framework of mutual respect. They said, this official, that they place great importance, the Chinese side, on improving US-China relations, not just for both countries, but for the global community as well. But they also said, look, there are some red lines on issues like sovereignty, which we will not back down on. We will continue and never hesitate to uphold our own interests and our own sovereignty. That was the message from officials here. In the last few days, China has welcomed back the new administration, of course, is going to sign on back onto the Paris Climate Accord. That is one area, climate change, where the two sides, many expect, could work together. Also, the tackling of COVID-19. China is positioned, it says, to work with the Trump administration, or the Biden administration, I should say, on the question of COVID-19, the pandemic. And also, state media here quoting experts suggesting that maybe trade is an area that the two sides could talk about as well. But there's also an acknowledgement in the state media here that the focus for the Biden administration will be on tackling COVID-19, and that the issue of China may be put on the back burner. Of course, we heard from incoming officials, nominees yesterday, the likes of Yellen, but also the incoming or the nominee for the Secretary of Defense in the US, suggesting that the hard line against China will not stop. It's just the tactics may change under the Biden administration. But certainly here in Beijing, there's hope that at least there will be some small windows of cooperation between the two sides.